Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Your Mark on the World show. I'm your host, Devin Thorpe, and our guest today is Georg Kell, who is the vice chairman of Arabesque. Georg, welcome to the show.
Great to be here. Thanks.
Well, it is an honor to have you. Your background is amazing. The work you've done at the UN and now at Arabesque really is inspiring, and we appreciate you taking a minute. I want to acknowledge and thank our sponsor, Vince Molinari, for providing an introduction to you, because we're really grateful for him and the support that his firm, A-Cloud Impact, provides to this show. But Georg, I want to start, if you don't mind, with your early work at the UN, especially as it came to kind of launching the United Nations Global Compact. And I think you said that really started when you helped Kofi Annan with a speech back in '99. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, initially the idea was to do a great speech for the boss, remember, these were the days when business went global. Globalization was in its first big movement, but governments remained local, and there was lots of fear and concern. Where would that go? Human rights, labor rights, environmental protection. So Kofi Annan delivered a speech at the World Economic Forum called the Global Compact, where he challenged business leaders, CEOs, head on, saying, look, you're going global. With you should also bring values and give globalization a human face. Practice within your own operations good, decent behavior, treat your workers well, protect the environment, and also strive towards anti-corruption measures. And it was basically just a speech, a policy speech to give globalization a human face, to anchor it in universal values. The reaction to the speech was overwhelming, hugely taken notice of. And so the expectation was that this speech be translated into something tangible, a real initiative. And then followed 15 years of building efforts, building up an engagement platform based on the concepts of learning, sharing, and best practices, starting in about 100 countries, bottom up, building networks through dialogue, learning, and sharing. And today, the Global Compact has over 9,000 corporate participants and about 4,000 not-for-profit organizations in many countries all over the world.
Wow, that's amazing, the impact that has grown out of that one speech. Going back a little further in time, what drew you to the United Nations? You're an engineer by background. I don't suppose you were doing engineering for the United Nations.
No, I was working first at the Fraunhofer Institute in Germany, doing research on automated flexible manufacturing cells. Actually, I was a world leader in that space. But at some point, I just started all over again. I went to East Africa, to Tanzania, for all sorts of adventure reasons. And I kind of, got involved there, building up a first institute with engineers there, first generation graduates from Dar es Salaam Technical University, asking the fundamental questions, how to build and create wealth and how to apply knowledge in a practical way. And that's where I got drawn into the UN kind of development thinking. I then discovered, I applied to the UN National Competitive Exam. I was lucky to get in. But then I was shocked because I discovered the UN is just about politics. And it really, really bothered me that every debate, every argument was about politics, not about pragmatism and practical solutions. So it became my obsession really to do away with what I call old ideologies and to introduce the voice of reason. It was a long struggle, and I'm not saying the struggle is finished now, but it has become my call to basically open up the organization and make clear that in today's world, public and private interests increasingly overlap, and it makes sense to partner, to collaborate. There's something in it for the private sector and something in it for the public sector. And as the world becomes ever more interdependent, the premium for collaboration is going up. Now, finding that spot of overlap is not always easy, but with an open mindset, I think you can recognize it everywhere in all critical issues: education, healthcare, environmental protection, even good governance. So it cuts across all the critical issues humanity has been struggling with and is struggling with.
Well, it's interesting how you were able to take that UN experience and bring it to a place that's so completely different, and yet where that skill set, that passion for involving corporations in solving big problems into the investment world. Tell us a little bit about what Arabesque is doing and what you do to help them as vice chairman.
Right. First, I want to share with you that during my 17 years building a corporate engagement platform, so to speak, we tried again and again to win over investors. Already in 2004, we produced studies called Who Cares Wins, where the term ESG was coined, 2004. In 2006, I helped to launch PRI, Principles for Responsible Investment. 2 years later, the Sustainable Stock Exchange Initiative, which is booming very well as well. Despite all these efforts, I always considered finance to be lagging behind the real economy. I always felt CEOs were on the front line and they understood much better how to handle with public priorities and make them part of a purpose-driven organization. Whereas finance always considered very short-term. The definition of risk-adjusted returns was very narrowly applied. And I was a bit frustrated, to be honest, about finance not paying more attention to these issues. So, and when my time at the UN came to an end, I turned 60 1.5 years ago. The CEO, the visionary founder of Arabesque, a former senior banker with Barclays, approached me and showed me the Arabesque model. Arabesque, by the way, means the beauty of geometry and math. And it knocked me off, because Arabesque applies a very systematic analysis to the ESG agenda and tries to quantify with rule-based, computer-driven, technology-driven approaches to get a better handle on what constitutes level. And this approach, I found it really totally convincing. I felt strongly this has to be the next move. The next move has to be to connect the emerging responsible, sustainable investment community with a responsible corporate community. Because CEOs, corporates have long complained that investors do not significantly and sufficiently pay attention to these issues, holding them back in their own investment decisions. Board members, likewise, often have complained about finance being very short-term and wanting to have a profit quickly, irrespective of long-term consequences. Here comes Arabesque, large numbers, data-driven, systematic integration of ESG into the investment universe. And that didn't need much convincing. It's the logic next evolutionary step of this agenda.
Interesting. That's really fascinating. Now, as you think about the work that you're doing there, clearly it's having a similar impact, even though you have a very different platform, don't you think?
Well, I actually think now that I discover the world of finance and how huge it is and complex, I actually think the playground is so much bigger. Actually, I feel totally energized now about the possibility of, if you so want, defining the next phase of sustainable asset management, rule-based, data-driven, quantitative. Huge kick. It's like a new start in life and a new challenge. And the knowledge about the corporate world, whether in Brazil, in Europe, in the US, or elsewhere, is extremely helpful, because the issues of ESG are evolving. They're context specific and they're very dynamic in their core. And Arabesque is a learning model insofar as the ESG handling is continuously improved and updated. So I find it a natural next fit, a beautiful one.
Fascinating stuff. Now, how much money does a person need to open an account with Arabesque?
Very little. That's the good news. We are about to roll it out also for the retail market. So even small investments are welcome. As a matter of fact, one of the issues that attracted me to Arabesque is that it's designed to actually appeal to everybody. So at the end of the day, you can actually put in $100. I want sustainable investment. I want to know where my money is invested in. I want to know exactly in a transparent way. And I want to also be able to quickly swap it into cash if I need it. So full liquidity, another big asset. No financial engineering of any kind, no unnecessary risk taking, purely plain sustainable investment in good companies or cash. So the vision is, at the end of the day, everybody.
Wow, that's great. That's fantastic. Now, George, you have had an incredible career. You've done amazing things. You're revered around the world. Who do you look up to for a role model?
Well, you asked me before, I have to give one name because there's so many great people everywhere, actually. You meet them every day. You just have to go out there. I mean, basically every person is a great person and has greatness in him or her. So I always shied away from this hero thinking personally. I found heroes where you least expect them. But if you force me to give a name, I would say the former Secretary General Kofi Annan. I really look up to him. He's one of those rare people who can look at issues and people from any possible angle, and then at the end of the day, distill, a very rational bottom line, combining this with a very humanistic concept. And I greatly admire this ability to look at people and issues from many, many different perspectives, like a bird, or like moving away from the globe and being able to put yourself into the shoes of anybody. And then you discover also that what connects us is so much stronger than what divides us. And it's up to us to actually get the good forces out and make them work. And that's what I learned from.
I have seen that myself. What connects us is so much stronger than what divides us. Around the world, everywhere I go, what we have in common is so much greater than the things that make us different. Now, you could be doing anything. My heavens, you started out as an engineer. I'm curious about what was the root of your passion for solving big world problems with private resources, companies as partners?
I always followed my instincts. I never really made a very rational, kind of decision making about career planning. I never had a CV until a curriculum vitae. I follow my instincts basically, and it has to be interesting and challenging. And you find challenge in the biggest and in the smallest things. You can do research on tiny little things and you see the whole universe in smallness. Or you can think about global interdependence and culture and interfaith issues and basic values. It doesn't really matter. It just has to be fascinating. It's a huge opportunity to be alive. Every day should count. It's present we have, and we can choose. The enemy is us, so to speak, because we have in us the potential to do very bad things, but we also can create and build. Sometimes I'm telling people, look, one of the choices we have is to either destroy what others have built or try ourselves to build something. I think we are made to be builders. It's beautiful.
Yeah, I love your comment, the enemy is us, just because we just so seldom think about that, our own potential to do bad things, and yet that is a very real potential. Great insight. Now, one last question, George. What is your superpower?
Nature, I must say. I find calmness and solitude in nature, especially in mountain streams or in the tiny community garden here on Roosevelt Island where I live in New York. But it's really the basics, back to harmony, back to basics and understanding or trying to understand how we are interconnected. It brings calmness. Fantastic. It softens.
That's great. Now, George, I appreciate all the time you've taken with us. Our time is up. But before you go, please tell people how they can learn more about Arabesque and connect with you personally.
Well, Arabesque has a great website. We are launching a new website just shortly next week, and we have some other exciting developments in the pipeline. So Arabesque values-based investment website. You can also personally contact me, Georg, like George without E, .Kell, Kell, arabesque.com.
Fantastic. Well, George, thank you so much for being with us today. We wish you every success in your efforts to make the financial markets more socially responsible.
Thank you very much. Pleasure.
All righty. Let's do some good.